throw this through the planer. So I'm gonna give you guys a video of this thing coming out of the planer once I get a few passes off it, so you can see it go from this nasty, gluey mess that's all over the place with like, whoa, like this, to being a nice flat workbench top. So just got out of our planer here. This is nice and smooth. This is actually the bottom, which is why you're seeing these little imperfections. The top's all nice and smooth. So this, if you're wondering, this is maple, and this crazy coloring that you're seeing here, this is an effect called ambrosia. It's technically a fungus. It's weird stuff. What we're doing over here, you can see right here, this looks like a table saw. The cool thing about this table saw is it can do super long cross cuts. This is actually a sliding table saw. So if I grab this right here, this whole piece slides separate from the blade right there. So what I'm gonna be able to do is slide this piece down and cut my ends nice and square here. So I'll cut this in and then I'll flip it over and cut all this nasty mess off here. So I've had this workbench top at my house for a while. I had milled it here way back in the beginning of the school year, and I wanted to make this into a workbench, but I haven't built the base for it yet. So come to find out that my roommate had this awesome vise, which is huge. I mean, it's even bigger than the ones that we have here in the shop. But I went ahead and cleaned this thing up because it was a little bit rusty. I need to mount this thing on the underside of this bench. So I've got my drawing here finished. There's a few things that I'm gonna have to tweak here after looking at how the vise mounts. I'm gonna have to play around with the dimension of these a little bit. I've actually already done that and put it down on a bill of materials. So I know how big each piece is. I've got my rough dimensions and my finished dimensions. So I pulled some lumber from outside. You can probably hear the rain. And I've pulled some of this hickory out from the giant pile out there. I've gone ahead and marked out what each piece is going to be. So I've got 2 of the legs, I've got the stretchers, the feet, the aprons, and then 2 more of the legs right here. Now, this tree is a hickory that this stuff came out of, and there's a lot of pretty rough areas. Like this one's got a pretty serious bow to it. Some of these just have a bunch of knots. Some of these have some live edge that I'm gonna have to work around. So there's gonna be a fair amount of waste material, but that's kind of typical when you're working with either hobby cut or lower grade lumber. So one thing that I'm gonna do before I get into putting this through any of my machines is taking a broom and getting a lot of this dust off of here. For this case, rough cutting lumber is something that I prefer the radial arm saw for. One, for power, and two, so that I don't mess up my accuracy of my chop saws, because if you bind on a chop saw, it's really gonna jerk it around and cause some issues. So that's why I use a radial arm saw. What I've got now is these pieces right here. And one thing about hickory is it's extremely dense, but it's also very, very heavy. So I've stuck it on a cart to save my back. And also, I wanna cut it down a little bit more and rough rip it into about the size that I need. So I've written what I need on each piece, so I don't have to carry my paper around. And I'm gonna bring them over here to our resaw bandsaw, which has got this nice thick blade on it for resaw.
Hey, we've got a problem here.
So I was using the dust collector yesterday and it started spitting some stuff back out. Come to find out, I was not paying attention to the dust collector. Just some of the things that I'm learning about the shop here. It's this giant mess of pipes and hoppers and things right here, but the main one is this hopper right there. So it's completely full, and I've actually got to get up in there with a stick and kind of pull some of it out. I'm gonna safety up, wear a respirator. It's gonna be a whole lot of fun. that was fun. That's a lot of sawdust. So, got all my parts cut here. I've stacked them up on this cart. They're much lighter now that I've taken a lot of the material off. Everything's all nice and squared up. So the next step is for me to cut all of the joints to make this thing go together. So I'm probably gonna start off with the feet down here. I'm gonna cut out this nice little section on the bottom, maybe cut these miters, and then we'll go to the top pieces here. Once I've done that, I'll start working on the legs, and the stretchers will probably go in last. So next step that I'm going to do here is I'm cutting the mortise and tenons for the legs. So I've got this leg right here. This setup that I've got right here, I've got a table saw sled. This is called a crosscut sled. And I've got a stop block clamped right here. And then I'm also using a dado set. Dado set is, or dado stack, is just a bunch of saw blades. There's usually 2 blades, and then there are some smaller blades that go in between called chippers that look like these guys right here. So what this is going to do is allow me to cut this into a tenon very quickly. And so I've got this set up to where I can just use this setup over and over again to cut a tenon on this end, that end, and the rest of the legs as well. To the point of cutting mortises. I've actually already cut a couple of these, and a mortise is just a square hole. This happens to be a through mortise where I chose to go all the way through this 2-inch thick piece. This is going to be the top section of the leg on one side of the workbench. I've already got the other one cut, but wanted to show you guys the square chisel mortiser. So this machine right here, that's sole purpose is to cut square holes. The way that it does that is using one of these bits. So it has a drill bit that is specially made to fit inside of this square chisel. It's got 4 very sharp points down here where the chisel will cut the square hole itself, but the drill bit, this auger bit, will remove about 80 to 90% of the material and get most of that out of the way, and then the chisel comes in and just can clean it up. So I've gotten to the point of getting all the mortise and tenons cut. These happen to be through tenons, and then the ones down in the bottom do not go all the way through. Got a piece over here. But the issue is that some of these are not quite fit properly. Oftentimes when you're cutting mortise and tenons, you will either have to adjust the mortise or the tenon. I'm choosing to adjust the tenon on this one just because recutting this is as simple as just raising the saw blade by a hair and going back to our crosscut sled in order to fix these so that they will fit properly in here. You don't want them to be super duper snug because when you add glue, the wood is going to expand. And so if this is already tight without glue, it's going to be next to impossible to glue up, and you don't want your glue up to go badly. Gotten both of these to the point where they fit together fairly well. Still have to use the mallet a little bit, but I'm okay with that. Some are a little bit loose. You can see some gaps there. Some are a little bit tighter. But overall, I'm pretty happy with the fit. Next step now is to cut the mortises here and also to cut the tenons on our stretchers.